Everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our Royal Baddies episode. Kat Morgan and I are here to talk about two of the royal baddies who we didn't get a chance to talk about in our last episode. These are two characters who were definitely on the coins that Astra pulled out from hell. Whether or not they're actually going to appear in any of the episodes of Legends of Tomorrow the coming season, we don't really know, or to what extent, but we love history here at the Legends of Tomorrow podcast, especially terrible, awful, gruesome history. So just to one up Mary Tudor and Genghis Khan, who technically I can't one up because his 40 million people.
It's hard to one up Genghis Khan, it turns out.
Yeah. People are terrible. People are evil. So we're going to talk about an ancient evil person and a more recent evil person. We don't really have any news to report because we are recording this directly after we recorded the previous episode. And unintentionally, both of these two historical figures, Caligula and Rasputin, are both mine. So this is going to be almost an entire episode of me giving you a history lesson.
This is going to be a very Amy-heavy episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Kat and I are going to be the color commentators.
Oh, for sure. Don't worry.
They're going to be the two class clowns at the back of the classroom. You know they are.
We are. We usually are on this podcast.
That's true. It's true.
All right, so let's begin. We're going to start with ancient history, and we are going to talk about Caligula. So Caligula is the third Roman emperor. He is followed, actually his official name, his true name is Gaius Julius Caesar. He's named after one of the most notorious Roman emperors ever in existence.
So he
Julius
started out in life not really with the right foot forward, you know?
Yeah. What's interesting about that is actually he has no royal connections. He is the son of a very famous, very successful general named Germanicus. His mother Agrippina is very well reputed. This is a wonderful family. They have great repute throughout Rome, and unfortunately his father Germanicus's reputation for being successful overshadows the actual current emperor of the time, named Tiberius. Tiberius is the second Roman emperor, so he is the previous emperor to Caligula. He is known for being evil. He is known for what's called the treason trials, which is basically where he took anyone who he thought might want to take his power, put them in front of the Senate, said these people are wrong, and killed them. And it led to a lot of senators
just might want to take his power. Like they weren't even like definitely trying.
Yeah, they basically anybody who he considered to be a threat, Tiberius killed. And unfortunately, Tiberius was very paranoid. He started to see things in everyone, and one of the people who he saw significant threat in was Germanicus. So Germanicus is disposed of. That's Caligula's father. Shortly after, Caligula's mother and his two older brothers are taken through the treason trials. His two older brothers are forced to commit suicide. They're literally shown how to commit suicide and left in the room to do so. His mother is exiled. Caligula is 9 years old. So at this point, he has had a remarkable, rather fantastic childhood up until the point in which almost his entire family is killed or exiled, and he is left essentially alone. Tiberius, the emperor of the time, who is feeling threatened and is starting to become increasingly more unpopular, essentially exiles himself to an island in the middle of nowhere off of Italy, where he basically has regular sex with everybody there, as well as
it's just his sex island.
It really essentially is. No, it really is. He has a son of his named Germelus, and Germelus it's not his son. Oh no, I'm getting my history wrong.
Uh-oh.
Hold on.
I just came back and heard I'm getting my history wrong. So
this is the point in the history lesson. I'm so embarrassed. I wanted to have this all right. Oh no. No, it is his son. No, sorry, grandson. There we go. That I knew I was close.
It's in the line.
It is the line. So basically, it's his grandson. Germelus, which is the current Tiberius's grandson, and Caligula are both roughly the same age. Germelus is brought to this pleasure island, and then Tiberius, being paranoid about Caligula, who again comes from a very popular family, is also brought to the island. Basically, Tiberius says, I just want to keep an eye on you, see what you're up to. Tiberius becomes increasingly more paranoid, can't decide which one of them he's going to name as his heir. This is a little bit different than monarch history, where the son becomes the heir. In this case, the emperors choose their successors. And at this point, Tiberius, who's becoming increasingly ill, has not chosen his successor. While Caligula is on this island with Tiberius, he listens to Tiberius. He's very respectful. He is a very smart individual. He's listening to everything Tiberius says. He's trying to impress Tiberius, and he continues to impress Tiberius, whereas Gemellus does not necessarily give off that impression, but Gemellus is family, whereas Caligula can be a threat. And Caligula essentially becomes really good friends with the leader of the Pretonian Guard at that point, Macro. Basically, he becomes friends with the army. Yes, the army dude's name is actually Macro. Macro. Yes, this is Roman history at its finest.
Sounds like a Minecraft name.
So while Caligula's on this island, he befriends the army, essentially, which, if you're going to have any friend, is the best friend to have. When Tiberius dies, Tiberius names both Caligula and Germelus as co-heirs, because that's going to go well.
I feel like that's not going to go well. I don't know. I don't know why I feel that way.
Caligula, having the army as his friend, and
having befriended the whole army.
And Macro.
That reminds me of like that Arrested Development, whenever like Buster is like, I'm going to army. It's like, he's like, my friend is army.
It's true. Caligula's chosen the best side here. He's very popular in the Senate. He's very popular with the army. And his friend Macro has great power in the Senate, and they actually are really, by all accounts, genuine friends. Macro goes to the Senate, convinces the Senate to throw out Tiberius's will, and they elect Caligula as the new emperor.
I mean, that's a pretty good friend.
It's a pretty good friend. Now, here's the thing. Caligula says, remember those treason trials that my predecessor have, where you guys were all afraid that you were going to die? I'm not going to do that. And I know that Tiberius kept all these records about y'all, and I'm going to destroy them. And he actually stands in front of the Senate with these records and burns them in front of the Senate, not telling them he's made copies. Dun, dun, dun. Foreshadowing.
Man, how long would copies take back in the day? Like, you would have to like hand write
Roman Kinkos.
You're not going to the Roman Kinkos.
Don't worry, I have one copy here.
So Caligula essentially takes over. Germelus is unceremoniously poisoned, taught to commit suicide. He dies. He's out of the picture. Caligula is now wholly in charge. The thing to realize, this is 37 AD. So this is a long time ago. The first 6 months or so of Caligula's reign are considered spectacular. He's a good emperor. He does everything he can to please the people. And again, this is 37 AD. Pleasing the people includes ceremonial gladiator matches, includes a lot of rich sort of, a lot of basically food, a lot of parties. Gladiatorial matches were a big deal. So he would have weeks upon weeks of these elaborate festivities in Rome and throughout the Roman Empire, and he became very well popular. He burnt through a significant amount of sestertii, which was the currency at the time, but he was generally relatively popular, and for the first 6 months, everything went great. We're not going to talk about the 4 wives he had in that first 6 months, but basically...
Just in the first 6 months?
Yeah, he said, I like you, marry me. I like you, marry me. I like you, marry me. And then he would summariously just divorce them. But we start to get
he didn't have them all at the same time.
No.
It wasn't like a sister wives situation. That's what I was imagining, like a harem.
It's funny you should say that.
Uh-oh.
So
Is that next?
Here's the thing. We start to discover Caligula has a bit of an obsession with sex. He chooses each of his wives because of how he likes them. He says, I think you're great. I know you're married. I'm going to make your husband divorce you. At one point, I believe he actually marries a wife who's still at that time married to another man, and he doesn't kill them, but basically he says, I want you, so you're going to become my wife. That does not seem to be a major problem for the Roman people yet, but it's definitely an inkling of things to come. About a year into his reign, Caligula gets incredibly ill with a fever, which was not uncommon at the time, but something snaps. When he recovers from the fever, it's like all the inhibitions he previously had are gone. He becomes very focused on his sexual appetite. He becomes very focused on death. He becomes instantly famous for his sadism. He is responsible for multiple deaths, multiple tortures. And when he doesn't like someone and he kills them, he explicitly says in multiple recorded documents to kill them painfully and slowly. He even sits and watches it while eating dinner. While having the
all because of a fever?
Yeah, all while having the family members of the person being executed there with him at the same time. There's even a report of one of the men whose like son or something is getting executed at Caligula's dinner table. And he says, I can't come, I'm too sick. Caligula sends a litter to pick him up and bring him to the execution. There is no escaping this. He is completely sadistic. He loves gladiatorial matches. There's even a senator who, when he was sick, said, if Caligula survives, I will fight in a gladiators. Caligula holds him to it. He says, I survived. Go fight the gladiators. And there's no real understanding on whether or not the senator survived. I think the general idea is he did, but he took down a lot of gladiators while doing it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. He is prone to violence, prone to torture, loves all of the gladiator stuff. He also loves his sisters. All three of them. Intimately.
Damn. Oh, God.
This is the original Game of Thrones. He has sex with all three of his sisters, Agrippina, Drusilla, and Livilla, while having an actual wife who eventually gives her a daughter. Now, here's the thing. He actually genuinely loves the middle sister, Drusilla, who is supposed to be the sort of quiet one. He loves his sisters so much, he puts them on major pedestals. They're considered Vestal virgins, ironic, meaning that they are free from persecution. They can have whatever they want. They're essentially the most praised people in Roman at that time. They get their own coins. And when his middle sister Drusilla, who he truly loves, dies, he goes into major mourning. He has statues erected for her. He creates her as essentially a goddess. He loves his sisters, but of course, they're his sisters.
He loves his sisters, but too much.
Yeah.
Yes. And
not in the right way.
Not in the right way. So things get worse. He is having affairs with his sisters. He's having affairs with married men. He's having affairs with senators' wives. He asks them, I'm going to borrow your wife. He doesn't ask them. He says, I'm going to take your wife. And it becomes increasingly clear to the Senate that he is going insane. And all of this is happening in the span of about 2 to 3 years. This is a very quick downcline. Yeah, you've got 6 months of greatness, then his pretty significant long fever, and then after a year again it switches. And what's interesting is a lot of historians don't think that he was ever not evil. There's suggestions that during his childhood and during that time that he was on the island with Tiberius, that he was exposed to sexual debauchery, that he was exposed to violence, because Tiberius was also like that. So that a lot of this may have been genetic, it may have been learned, but that whatever this fever was may have simply taken away the inhibitions. And I don't think anyone could ever clearly say that that's what was caused it, but it's very clear that after the fever, he was a different person. Now, campaign-wise, Roman emperors are supposed to expand the Roman Empire. That is what makes them famous. That is what gives them memory. That is what made his father, Germanicus, so popular, is that his father was able to capture and expand into parts of Germany. So Caligula says, I'm going to try this, and it's going to work. He has no military inclination whatsoever. He has none of his father's skills, none of his father's abilities.
But he has all those friends in army.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention, he killed Macro.
Oh no.
Not Macro.
That's his buddy.
Yeah, but he thought Macro was going to try to kill him. So he went crazy and he killed his only friend, which of course was a terrible idea. So he kills Macro. He has no command of his army. So he goes to Germany. He's like, I'm going to take over Germany. And then he gets scared and says, nope, just kidding, with the army with him. And instead says, let me go take over Britain. Well, they go to the English Channel, and in something that no one really understands, they get on the boats, they go out on the way to England, Britain at that time, turn around, come back to the shore, and he tells all of his army to pick up shells from the edge of the English Channel. Then when they go back to Rome, he tells his army that they have to tell the Roman people that those are the shells that they have as trophies from Britain, the island they never landed on.
Wow, so he's a liar. I thought when I heard they were picking up shells, I thought it's like, all right, you're gonna make a scrapbook. You are gonna become.
No, it was evidence of his.
I thought they were gonna throw the shells, and I was like, well, that doesn't seem like the most effective way of.
Yeah, so this isn't going well for him. This isn't good. The people don't like him right now. He burned through a lot of money, but he's had nothing to show for it. The Senate really is not liking it. And because he starts to doubt the Senate, he starts to make comments like, my horse would be a better senator. He literally says he wants to make his horse a consul because it's smarter than his senators. Well, of course, the senators start to whisper, and they're like, okay, this guy is real bad. So that's when Caligula pulls out his Kinko's copies and says, oh yeah, remember all those treason trials I told you I burnt? These are all the people that have wronged my family in the past. And he begins to summarily execute them in his long, slow, torturous way. And he continues to kill senators. You can't do this in Rome. I mean, you really can't do this anywhere, but he is not
especially Rome.
But yeah, he's especially not only Rome.
He's peeving off the people. He's got nothing to show for it. And now he is essentially setting him up to be himself to become his namesake, because Gaius Julius Caesar was killed by the senators. So he says, let me just follow in that line of succession. So he is coming back from the theater one day where he is taken into an alley and killed by multiple senators and assassinated less than 4 years into his reign. So 41 AD, he is killed and assassinated, and he is succeeded by his uncle Claudius, who may or may not have been involved. Also, I forgot to mention, his sister Agrippina may also have been involved with his execution, because at one point he gets pissed with her and exiles her. And she is very fond of power. She is the father of Nero, the emperor who you all have heard of. Nero eventually becomes emperor. Dun, dun, dun.
Damn,
so
what a twist.
That is Caligula in a nutshell. He is completely debauched. He loves sex. He loves violence. He loves torture. He's very sadistic. He loves his sisters. He was sort of set up for success until Tiberius killed all his family. So 25 years old, he becomes emperor. By 29 years old, he is dead in one of the shortest reigning emperors ever. That's Caligula, ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa. I did not know that he was an emperor for such a short amount of time.
Yeah, you would expect it to be like a huge period of time. No,
that's
it's a very short period.
So he just had it, like, he didn't really... He just had a hissy fit throughout his whole entire
basically
run.
Yeah, he has nothing to show for it. Besides the death that he caused, there is nothing about Caligula that made Rome better. They didn't expand their territories. They didn't get better aqueducts or architecture. They didn't get any land, and they certainly didn't get richer. I mean, he basically did no good and all bad.
Man. So how do you think Legends will
I don't know.
bring that to? Yeah, I mean, he just sucked.
Unless it's just, I mean, I think if they're going to do one person that might show up and like disappear within half an episode, it might be him.
Oh yeah, for sure. He disappears for a second.
Yeah.
Maybe during his fever time. He's just really sick.
He just gets a really bad. Maybe somebody on the Wave Rider gets a really bad fever, and they start hallucinating Caligula.
Caligula.
Yeah, he's just a bad news bears Roman emperor, but he is considered one of the most evil people in history, according to this History Channel series entitled "The Most Evil Men and Women in History."
Guys, we just get all our information from the History Channel.
We loved that History Channel series, and both Amy and I both watched one of them.
And yeah, I just read history.com, so close second.
No, it's pretty interesting stuff. I don't know exactly how he would show up in the Wave Rider, but he would certainly be an interesting one to have who might argue with I could see him, I don't know, showing up in the wrong time period with Caesar, or he's a Roman emperor, or he just shows up and literally fails all of his campaigns. Like, that would be interesting, because I mean, by all accounts, it basically makes him a coward. Like, what if he is supposed to go and be in like the shoes of, I don't know, some famous general in history, and then he gets there and he's like, nope, bye. And then history falls apart because of that.
You know what I could see happening? Having all these rulers in one episode, and they all play Dungeons and Dragons. I could see that, because they have to, make up. Well, maybe play Risk as well, because isn't that whole entire game about like conquering the world?
True.
So there you go. Like, play
all
Risk.
Right. The next historical figure is one that I am a little bit more into the history for. A couple episodes ago, I told y'all about a book I was listening to called The Romanov Empress, which was about Anastasia, which is how you properly pronounce Anastasia, in Anastasia Romanov. And it was about her grandmother, which, if you guys have seen the Anastasia movie, Anastasia is the grandmother who's in that movie. So this is about Grigory, technically, Rasputin, who was essentially involved with the downfall of the Romanovs. So we were just in ancient times. Speed forward a little bit. We are now in essentially, flash forward, we're essentially in the early 1900s. This is the point leading up to World War I. This is prior to the Titanic. And I know this is interesting, but this is something I had to remind myself. This is when photographs and videos were now possible. So a lot of this history is not speculative. Most of the characters, Khan, Mary Tudor, Caligula, now, we mainly have artwork. The difference with Rasputin is that there is actual recorded evidence of things he's done. There's videos of things that happened during that time period, and people who he was involved with at some point down the line. A lot of them actually record things in the later like 40s and 50s when they're much older. So there's a lot more history about Rasputin. But to give y'all just some basic history, we are in Russia. The Romanovs are a dynasty that has ruled since Catherine the Great, 300 years of a monarchy. This is one of the most, this monarchy is one of the largest that has the biggest difference between the monarchy way of life and the peasantry way of life. This is a period of time where up to about 40 years prior to when all of what I'm going to have talked about happens, serfs still existed. Russia is majorly behind the times. In the early 1900s, they are behind in the industry. They're behind in modern day politics. They're behind in modern day warfare. They are essentially crazy segregated from the world. And they're behind in essentially everything, which unfortunately leads to some major issues down the line. Unless you are rich. And if you are rich, you have a lot of money. You have internal heaters. You have a lot of money. You have a lot of money. Need to make this very clear. The upper class of Russia was extraordinarily rich, and the royal family, which had a lot of members in it, was exceedingly rich. But at the turn of the 1800s to 1900s, for the most part, while there is definitely unrest in the peasantry, the Romanovs are still considered their monarch. There's a huge sense of patriarchy. Not patriarchy, I'm sorry, patriotism. And interestingly, also
patriarchy, I'm
patriarchy.
sure.
They actually considered the Russian emperors to be their fathers. They call him their little father. So at the time that Rasputin starts to come into play, there is an Emperor Nicholas II. This is the last Roman emperor. His wife is named Alexandra. Alexandra is a Hesse prince or princess, sorry. So she is related to Victoria, Queen Victoria of England. At this time, it should be known that all of the royal people anywhere in Europe were somehow related to one another and essentially somehow related to Queen Victoria. This is an important key point to remember, as we will get into a little bit later.
Also, I mean, Queen Victoria did have like 500 children, so.
And she married them all off, and they had children or cousins. I mean, Victoria is directly related to most of these people. Nicholas II's father was killed by bomb when his carriage exploded. It was claimed essentially terrorism from people in dramatic peasants. That sounds terrible. It was a terrorist group run by people who wanted to have more power and influence, because unlike places like England and other monarchies who had parliaments, there was no parliament in Russia. At the time, it was the monarchy or bust. They ruled, they were in charge, they were the ones taking care of everyone, or supposedly. And what is so ironic about that is that Nicholas II's father had just written a document to create the first Russian parliament called a Duma right before he was executed, or right before he was killed and assassinated.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So if he had been able to live even a week longer, none of this might have happened. World history might be drastically different. That's one of those, I wonder what would have happened if this person survived. The world could be a completely different place if Nicholas's father. I'm sorry. No, it's his grandfather. Gosh, his grandfather was
grands.
It's the grandfathers. There's so much history.
That might be the Legends episode.
There you go.
Time. There you go.
Yeah, so it was his grandfather that wanted to create the Duma. So that was, 30 years prior to that. His father basically knew of his grandfather's plan and is like, yeah, but that sounds like too much change. And so his father was a very stagnant ruler. His father kind of didn't change anything. He didn't make things worse. He really didn't make things better. There was an assassination attempt on him as his family, but ultimately the status quo remained the same, which if you are living in that time period as a peasant and you would like to have a parliament, really isn't actually that good. You'd like to see some improvement, but nothing really changed. His father dies from a sickness. Nicholas takes over. The thing with Nicholas is that he has none of the charisma of his father. He has very little self-independence, and he tends to be easily influenced. He's not married at this point, but he ends up marrying the woman who he has loved for a long time, named Alexandra. That is the Hesse princess. She is a Germanic princess, which Russia and Germany don't really always get along. So this is not really a spectacular match. She's not a big princess. His mother doesn't like her. And at that time, his mother was the leading Russian historical figure. Her name was Maria, and they called her Minnie. Minnie was in charge. You wanted Minnie's favor. She's now the Dowager Empress, but literally people in all the ministers would go to her for information and go to her for advice over their new emperor. The thing that kind of already sets Nicholas's reign to fault is that as part of their ritual to basically celebrate their coronation, what the emperors do is, or the czars rather, oh gosh, I'm still stuck on the Caligula stuff. At this point, it's the czar. They have this big event where they go to a huge field and they basically hand out party favors to anyone who comes. And they're cool stuff. It's, like silver plates and spoons and that's cool stuff for as a gift to the peasants of the time. Well, it's really poorly planned by Nicholas's advisors, and it's so poorly planned that too many people show up, they start a stampede, and over 1,000 people die. And this is the day of his coronation.
Whoa.
And they have all of these coronation festivities they need to go through, and Nicholas is advised by his mother, the Dowager Empress. She's like, you need to not go to these balls. You need to go see your people. You need to be in the hospitals. You need to be showing that you care. Nicholas takes the advice of his wife, his new wife, Alexandra, and some people who he really should not be listening to, including his uncle Sergei. And he basically ignores the event. And he goes about having his grand old parties, which really pisses off the peasants. So the thing is, yes, people are upset with him. They're not super upset with him, but they're starting to get upset with them. A small group of people called the Bolsheviks are starting to get upset with him. But Nicholas manages to sort of quell the terrorist groups, and they sort of go underground for a while. The easiest way for Nicholas to recover face is to have a son. This is the Mary Tudor thing we talked about on the last episode. He needs to have a son. Alexandra, his wife, needs to have a son, because that'll create a sense of nationality and how the little father is having sons. And here's how wonderful the monarchy. His wife gives birth to a daughter, then another one, and then 2 more daughters. 4 beautiful, charming, lovely, genuinely gorgeous daughters, but they are not a son. And now a significant amount of time has passed. Now we're in about 1912. So we're many, many years into his reign. There is a lot of talk about how our emperor is not doing. I just keep saying emperor. I'm sorry. They do call him that in certain regions. The Tsar is not doing enough, and they really need a son. And his wife, Alexandra, becomes obsessed with this idea of getting a son. She is desperate to have a son, and she does. She ends up having a young boy named Alexei. This is supposed to be the savior of the Romanov emperor of the empire. And Alexei has a debilitating, devastating blood disorder called hemophilia. Hemophilia is passed from the mother to the son, and it prevents blood from being able to clot. So poor Alexei is not even a couple days old, and he gets bleeding at where his umbilical cord was, and it won't stop. Just won't stop. They finally managed to get it to stop, but this is what's known as the Hesse curse. It is responsible for multiple deaths of royal family members who are linked to Victoria. This was passed through Victoria's bloodline, which, as we talked about earlier, is now in the entire European royal families. So poor Alexei is essentially doomed to die. At this point, Alexandra, her husband Nicholas, the Tsar, the daughters, one of whom is Anastasia, and Alexei, the new Tsarevich, basically the heir, have already been away from public life. Alexandra does not like public life. She does not want to be the empress. She doesn't want to go to parties. She doesn't impress the socialites. She doesn't impress the rich people. She doesn't impress the poor people. She's an absent empress, and that is a massive issue, because this is not what the Romanovs are supposed to be. They're supposed to be present. They're supposed to be Russia's little father. They're supposed to be there for the people. So now, on top of everything, they have a son who no one sees. They have a son who doesn't go to events. He's never out in public. They keep him completely sequestered, because literally falling on his knees could start internal bruising, and it does. There comes a point where his legs get so big he can't use them. This poor kid is in excruciating pain, and if he falls and injures himself and starts internal bleeding, he could die. Enter Grigory Rasputin. Rasputin is from an obscure place in the middle of nowhere, Siberia. He was, by all accounts, a really weird child. Growing up, he was a very strange sort of troublemaker. He was told to stay away from church because you're weird, and he would like to cause trouble, throwing things. Yeah, he was just he was an unruly kid.
Can't even go to church.
He can't even go to church.
That's rough.
Yeah, no, literally the priests, the Orthodox Church literally said, no, please stay away, dude. You're weird. You keep disrupting everything. And this is in his middle of nowhere Siberian town. But he has this strange magnetism to him connected to his eyes. His eyes are somehow, they're described as being hypnotic. He has an ability to get people to listen and pay attention to him in almost a mystical, magical sort of a way. And as he becomes older, he gets interested in orthodoxy, which is the Christian orthodoxy at the time, realizes basically the church is not for him, but he thinks he has this mystical ability and essentially views himself as a saint. So he finds a cult because that's what all people do when they feel like they have special abilities.
Yeah, you start a cult.
Yeah, and the cult he doesn't really become a part of, but he takes one of their teachings to heart. And the idea is that to get God's forgiveness, first one must sin. Rasputin decides, okay, the best way to sin is through adultery and through sex. So there's a theme of my characters tonight.
My question is, does he visit Sex Island?
No, he has orgies in the middle of nowhere, Siberia.
That's also pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean,
wait,
is he having orgies like for the fun of it, or is he just really cold? Because it seems a little cold in Siberia
and lonely.
So he didn't believe he committed sin beforehand. He's like, nah, I just got to do this right now.
Yeah.
I lied. That's just not big enough, you know?
Yeah, basically he goes to women and he seduces them with these hypnotic eyes, and however he talks, this like magnetism he has. I should rewind and say real fast that Rasputin is the definition of creepy. Especially physically, he has a dirty, mangy beard. It's not well kept. His hair is long and awkwardly parted. Yeah, I put a picture up for the girls to see here.
His eyes are rough.
Yeah,
because they just shine out of nowhere. So he is,
but they're not like hypnotic. They're just like, get away from me.
Yeah, but he's so covered in hair that the eyes are like they stick out.
They definitely do.
Anyway, he basically manages to convince a whole bunch of girls to have sex with him. Then he can ask God for forgiveness. We're going to have to put an explicit on this episode because this episode is all sexual debauchery.
I mean, last episode was maybe a little bit more
in the last episode, like they threw a baby in a fire. So I feel like it's all bad.
History's dark, man. So in the midst of all of this, Rasputin starts to wander around Russia. He basically is wandering around to share his message. He also starts to get a bit of a reputation for being a mystic, starts to get a reputation for having healing abilities. And Russia at the time is starting to get into this mystic idea of seances and Ouija boards. And he finds himself in the capital city of St. Petersburg and somehow manages to find his way into the house of very prominent socialites in Russia who are fascinated by him, fascinated by his healing abilities. He's able to calm people. That's what he's known for. He has like this inexplicable calming effect. You're talking to him and suddenly everything's okay. Everything is fine. It's almost like he's a drug, and being near him is intoxicating to people. So he finally finds his way into the social circle of the Romanovs and meets Alexandra, who at this point has her son, but whose son is facing death every single day from the smallest injury. And poor Alexei at this point is a young child. He's confined. He's not allowed to do anything. He can't run around with his sisters. He can barely work with his dogs, and he has moments of excruciating pain. He bleeds a lot. He is just a difficult child because he's so desperate to be active. And somehow someone introduces Rasputin to Alexandra, and the moment that Alexei, the Tsarevich, meets Rasputin, he becomes much more calm. He stops bleeding. He is more relaxed. And to Alexandra, Rasputin is God. He is a miracle incarnate who showed up to give her son the only relief that he has ever had. So basically, Rasputin moves in with the Romanov family at
That
their
was quick.
palace of Sashko-Selo, because it's the only time that Alexei ever finds relief is when Rasputin is there. And, it's going back and forth. He has a little bit of influence over Alexandra. He's good with the girls. He kind of gets along with everything. I'd like to point out again, he's good with the girls. He has this creepy calming effect over the daughters as well.
Ugh.
And even Nicholas II, who doesn't really have an opinion one way or another, can't deny that his wife is obsessed with this man and his abilities. At one point, Rasputin is away back visiting his middle of nowhere Siberia home, where he, by the way, has a wife and children. And while he's gone, Alexei falls off a horse, gets such massive internal bleeding that he is going to die. This poor young boy is in massive
Why did he
pain.
go on a horse?
Whoa.
It was supposed to be a special horse with a special saddle. When he was riding with his mother, of all things.
Man, but
So
I
he
was
falls off the
him.
horse.
I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm not going on any horse. That's
Yeah.
just, I'm
But
gonna
we're talking
fall.
like a 9-year-old boy. You can't
Yeah.
tell a 9-year-old boy not to go on a horse when everyone, including his sisters, are on a horse. So he falls off the horse. He's gonna die. Alexander sends a telegram to Rasputin and says, I don't know what to do. Rasputin sends a telegram back. The telegram says, I'm praying for you. He's in God's hands. He will recover. Tell the doctors not to bother him. So Alexandra shoves all the doctors out of the room, closes the door. The next day, Alexei recovers. And he gets better.
Crazy.
That is crazy, but also I love don't let the doctors bother you. Although I mean, back in that day, like the doctors probably might have killed you. Like the doctors would be like, "Have we tried leeches?"
For this bleeding disorder.
I think the problem with this bleeding disorder is that you're not bleeding out enough of your bad blood.
There's not enough
Bad
leeches.
Yeah, and Russia is again behind the times, but this is a problem because now Alexandra is 100% convinced this man can do no wrong. Fast forward a year or two, World War I has erupted. Remember how I said Russia is significantly behind the times? World War I is a series of a whole bunch of countries going to back up their friends. So 2 small countries get into a tiff, and all of those small countries' allies gang up with them. So now you essentially have Germany and their friends versus Russia and their friends. Germany is significantly more equipped to win a fight over Russia. Russia has very poor military weapons. They've got really bad medicine. They're behind the times, and men are dying by the hundreds of thousands within a very short period of time. Nicholas II, the Tsar, thinks, oh, this must definitely be because my generals suck. So he relieves his generals and takes over as commander-in-chief. He goes to the front lines. While he does this, he leaves his wife Alexandra in charge. Well, guess who he's actually leaving in charge? Rasputin. So at this point, prior to World War I breaking out, it essentially became very clear to Nicholas II that he had to create some sort of parliament or he was going to be overthrown. Those terrorist groups and the Bolsheviks who he thought they had gotten rid of or at least put underground came back out again. And in desperation, they form a parliament, which they call a Duma. And the Duma is essentially able to pacify the Bolsheviks and the other Russian terrorist groups for a little bit. Some of those peasants become part of it. It's actually essentially, in a way, it's like a senate. But Rasputin starts to appoint people he thinks should be in charge. This is a man from the middle of nowhere, Siberia, who thinks that the best way to get God's love is through sex. This is not the kind of man you want ruling the Russian Empire. So he continues to put his friends in charge, and they continue to make poor decisions on top of the fact that Nicholas II has no idea how to run an army. Up to 2.5 Russian soldiers are killed within a matter of years.
Wow.
Not even, like literally, let's see, 1916. So we're talking about 2 years. 2.5 million, up to 2.5 million, there's really no clear numbers, are killed. I mean, I'm talking literally the Russian soldiers show up for a battle in the middle of winter wearing summer clothing.
Uh-oh.
They don't have guns.
No.
They don't have bullets, or the bullets are on one side of the army and the guns are on the other. So they can't go together. They're literally fighting with their hands. Like, this is
Wonderful.
just the worst. So this is a major blow to Nicholas II's reign. When, by the way, previous in his history, early in his reign, he went to war with Japan and lost. Nicholas II has no redeeming qualities. He is a pushover. He listens to his wife, which is fine, but his wife is listening to Rasputin, who has already made himself a major enemy with almost every other member of the royal family, who don't like the fact that he's in charge. They don't like his influence over Alexandra. They don't like the fact that he is essentially taking over Russia. There is a minister at this time who puts together a whole list of the reasons Rasputin is terrible. And he gives it to Nicholas II. This is a minister, Stolypin. And Stolypin basically is well trusted by Nicholas's mother, the Dowager Empress. He is a well-respected man. He gives this list to Nicholas, who says, okay, yeah, that's definitely bad. Alexandra, his wife, says, yeah, but he's a saint. Our son is still alive. It doesn't matter. Without him, our son will die. The heir to the Romanov Empire will die. So Nicholas doesn't do anything about Rasputin. A couple of weeks later, Stolypin is killed at the theater. The last person who basically could possibly convince Nicholas II to get rid of this man is gone. And Rasputin essentially has full control over the Russian Empire through Alexandra, while Nicholas II continues to lose the war and continues to cause death. While all of this is happening, there is circulations going around that Rasputin is sleeping with Alexandra, that they are having orgies in the palace, that the daughters are involved, that the son is involved.
That's not far-fetched.
And it's not hard to believe. Although it's interesting, none of the historians that I was watching, none of the books I read or anything actually have any evidence that anything happened between the two of them. I think if Alexandra got pregnant, that'd be a different story. Yeah. But ever since she meets, there's no question whatsoever. There's no way Alexei is Rasputin's, because they didn't meet until after all of her children were born. But while all of this is happening, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, have essentially they're coming to power, and they're becoming a major issue. And they're basically putting out as much propaganda against Rasputin and the Empress as possible, and the smart members of the royal family, including Nicholas's nephew, start to realize that unless they get rid of Rasputin, there's a very good chance that the Romanovs will lose their throne. So in 1916, a gentleman by the name of Felix Yusupov, who is married to Nicholas's granddaughter, I know I have that right, gets a couple friends together. He says, we're going to kill Rasputin. They invite Rasputin over to his house with the promise that he can have sex with his wife.
Weird.
Well, that's
they
how
take
they
him
get
down.
into the house, you know?
Rasputin shows up looking as clean as he can manage. Basically, he's wearing a nice shirt. He shows up. They take him into the basement. They say, all right, we're going to bring the girl down. Here, have some cakes. The cakes are laced with cyanide. He eats the cakes. Nothing happens. They all start looking at each other. They're like, oh, okay. They give him some wine laced with cyanide. Nothing happens.
What?
Felix Yusupov gets so annoyed. He goes upstairs, grabs a gun, comes down, shoots Rasputin 3 times in the side. They think he's dead, so they leave the room. Rasputin claws his way out of the room, out of the cellar. So he finds his way into the courtyard where they shoot him again. But Yusupov is so upset he's still alive, he castrates the man.
Oh my God.
Rasputin is not yet dead.
Oh my
Is
god.
Rasputin a horror movie villain? Like, what is this?
He's Michael Myers for sure.
He really is.
They throw him into the river, still alive. They know that because when his body shows up downstream, finally dead, the autopsy proves that he had water in his lungs when he died.
Oh my God.
So this is a horrible, devastating end to an evil man, but
Took
unfortunately,
like 5 tries.
to kill, yeah. This comes too much too late. The Bolsheviks take power. They start a civil war in Russia while, mind you, World War II is still going on. Russia basically withdraws from World War II and is like, we got our own problems. This is what leads to 2 years later, after Rasputin's death, the Russian Tsar abdicates. Nicholas gives up his power. He and his family, his 4 daughters and his son, are removed to who knows where, Siberia, where they lose all contact with the rest of the Romanovs, who are also fleeing for their lives. Essentially, the Bolsheviks are going to kill most of the royal family if they can find them. The grandmother, the Dowager Empress, manages to survive with, ironically, Felix Yusupov and his family. But the entire royal family is executed. Every member of his family, all of their staff, and even their dogs are taken into a cellar and shot and killed.
Dogs.
And the dogs.
Why do they have to kill the dogs?
Yeah. Shot and killed, loaded into a wagon, taken to the middle of nowhere, and ceremoniously or unceremoniously just dumped in an unmarked grave. And then there's no real news about what happens. It's just rumors. And eventually it causes massive issues, which then essentially leads to the Soviet communism coming to place. But the Romanov line is dead. There is no one left of the Romanovs. And it isn't even until decades later where they actually find the grave where the Romanov family was disposed of. So that's why all those theories that Anastasia may have survived come from, because there was no real evidence. Unlike, remember at the time where they had a lot of videos, like they have the videos of that terrible massacre during his coronation day when people were trampling each other. They have videos of Rasputin talking in his like really weird hypnotic way, but there was no evidence of what actually happened to the Romanov family until they go back and basically members of the royal family who are left find the cellar, find the bullet holes, and put the pieces together. It isn't until years and years later where they actually get the history of what happened in the cellar. And that's why they think at one point Anastasia might still be alive. And a lot of people claim to be her, even though she was definitely killed. They were able to find essentially all the bodies and put all the bones together. But that is the fall of the Romanov Empire that survived for 300 years and brought down essentially by a man from the middle of nowhere, Siberia, Rasputin.
Wow.
That was a roller coaster.
That was
right? Now,
bonkers.
Here's what I hope happens. I really want. So he is known in Romanov history as the mystic. That's what they called him. All of the people who didn't like them would use it as a kind of a curse. They called him
He actually
the
has
mystic.
magic.
I would love for him to like show up in Damien Dark's body.
Oh man, that'd be really interesting.
Like, what if he comes and like inhabits a body of someone who actually has mystical abilities?
I think he's probably the easiest one out of everyone we've talked about to be in an episode of Legends of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree.
Mystical thing going on. He doesn't want to die. That's weird. Maybe wouldn't it be interesting in the Legends timeline? Maybe he didn't die, and it's like he's immortal or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would be really interested in seeing him show up in a character and like he has this ability to seduce women and to like hypnotize women. I would love to see him like on the Wave Rider, just hypnotizing all of them, making them do whatever he wants.
I think that'd be really interesting. I don't know. I want to see a whole episode about that. That'd be cool.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I also want to see the Bloody Mary episode where they can't look into mirrors. But Genghis Khan, on the other hand, I don't know what
we don't know what's happening in the Genghis Khan episode.
That's the whole episode. But yeah, that's our historical baddies, and then we're doing the serial killers. Probably closer to Halloween, and then that's all the coins we got, right?
I think so. There might be one or two like miscellaneous baddies, but clearly they weren't important enough for us to remember.
Definitely not. So after that, we'll have to decide what we're gonna do. But at least we have October covered.
Yay! Did y'all learn lots tonight? That was 54 minutes of me talking.
Much. The thing I knew about Rasputin was just that he was like impossible to kill. It's like one of my favorite stories. The thing about like they tried to poison him this way, and then they tried to poison him that way, and then they shot him, and then they shot him again, and then they shot him again, and then they threw him in a river, and he still survived. Like, it's so crazy.
It's terrible.
I think what I've learned is that he's been staring at me this whole entire show, and he just looks like a creep.
He looks so angry.
Yeah,
it's weird. Like, it's so strange. It seems shocking to me that it's strange to me to think that he definitely, like, I can imagine that he didn't sleep with Alexandra, but there's no evidence to it. There's things have made up, but people made up the fact that Marie Antoinette said let them eat cake. I mean, the newspapers can make up whatever they want,
especially at that time.
Yeah. Especially if the newspapers were mad at him, like, of course they're going to claim he slept with the Empress. But like, that's weird. I feel like the husband wouldn't have let that happen. Like, I feel like that would have been the last straw. He's like, all right,
the husband
man.
was just like
whatever.
I gotta deal with the rest of this shit. So
husband's like, I've got some stuff going on right now. I just like can't with you.
Yeah, it's like, hi, thanks for comforting my wife.
Poor the whole reality was that it was already on a tinderbox, and then Rasputin just lights it up.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, those are definitely interesting stories, and I'm sure you guys learned a lot. I learned so much today in this time span.
I feel so much smarter now. I know. Now I know about Sex Island.
Yeah.
I know about like Russian history.
A lot of Russian history over there. I
couldn't help it. You can't.
No, honestly, I thought it was really cool. So, yeah, and then again, serial killers. You're gonna learn a lot about serial killers.
Yeah, serial killers. It's gonna
I know
be
nothing
spooky.
About them.
It's gonna be scary.
We're gonna be audio, but just know that I'll have a flashlight towards my face the whole entire time.
Know that while I'm doing my serial killer, I'm going up a staircase backwards with a candle and a hand mirror.
Oh man.
Don't worry, that's what's gonna be happening. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and let's start plugging away. So I'm gonna start with Amy this time.
Oh man, you guys can find me on Twitter, Amy__Marie97. You can also find me on Instagram, Amy_Marie97. You can also find me in Sense and Sensibility, a play here in San Diego at the end of October through middle of November. Details will be on my Twitter page once we have the ticket link out. And I don't know, maybe we should all start a historical podcast. Let's do it.
I'm game.
I'm game too. Just going for how long these 2 episodes.
It was legendary history.
We had to split it into 2 episodes.
And who knows what's going to happen next time. So,
wow. Anyone who doesn't like my voice, I apologize for tonight's episode.
So, but for you, Morgan, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Mojotastic. You can also find me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where we will be finishing up the last couple of character spotlights and getting ready for the new season to start.
Yes, and for me, you could follow me at Comic Uno anywhere you can follow me, Twitter, Facebook. It is 2:00 in the morning here. And then also go check out our comic show. Definitely will be aired by this point. So Comic Book Weekly, where we talk about comic book news and also our favorite comics of the week. So that's every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Comic Frontline. So definitely go check that out. And thanks, guys. Stay legendary.
You're like